And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Ryan Metzler here today, and today we're going to take a look at a new game from Tasty Minstrel Games, or an upcoming game from Tasty Minstrel Games. We're going to take a look at Noblemen. Now, this hasn't been released yet, and they're a publishing partner on this game, but this is going to be a game for 3 to 5 players that's going to combine several different mechanics you've seen in Euro games before in a new way. You'll have some tile laying, a little bit of area control / worker placement, and some structure building out on your tiles. So real quick, why don't we take a look at how this game plays and some of the unique mechanisms that are found in it, and then we'll come back here and get my final thoughts on the package as a whole. Here you can see the central board for Noblemen. This is set up for a 5-player game, as indicated by the 5 victory point tokens and the 5 prestige tokens on the prestige track. In addition, you'll see this board houses several things. We have our round marker, which is going to kind of dictate the turns as they change, tell you what's going to change in the game. The decade tracker, which will track the 3 decades of the game. And then several areas that are holding building, palaces, castles, follies, and chapels respectively, which will give you different bonuses throughout the game for building them. In addition, we're going to have these bribe tokens, which you can buy on your turn for victory points and use later in the game in order to kind of get an advantage. All of these different buildings are going to do different things. I'll cover them really quickly. On your turn, you can choose to use your action to buy them. This one will allow you to take the queen, which is going to be kind of a marker that advances the game and gives you victory points. The castles over here are going to be built, and they're going to allow you to place one of your little guys out on somebody else's property in order to kind of take something from them, either get more tiles or more money or something to that extent. The chapels over here are really going to be mostly about victory points, but will allow you to get more scandal cards, which are cards you can play in addition to your action on your turn in order to do more. Finally, you have the follies here, which are really just victory point scorers, but you have to have prerequisites built in order to get them out to the table. In addition, there are 4 spots for placing tiles, which you can donate to the church each round, each decade. And up to 3 tiles of each type can be played onto these in order to get points, 1 point per tile played, but you can play as many as you want when you play out there. So if you had all 12, you could satisfy them all at once. Now that we've covered this board and how it works, we're going to move on to the next area. But first, let me real quickly describe how this central area works. The round is going to advance only when a player ends their turn with this queen marker. So this is going to start with the last player, and if they still have it on their turn, the round will advance to the next round. At that point, they'll get a victory point and they'll continue on. After that, if it transfers to another player, let's say the first player takes it from the last player, and so they're going in sequence, it would move forward again, and the first player would now get their victory point. So you'll see the amount that this queen travels is going to dictate how long the game lasts. At certain points, you're going to come across special events. These are masquerades, and when you move on them, a special scoring round will happen, where you're going to score prestige and get new titles in the game, which will give you victory points and money and special things. In addition, when you get to this spot, it's going to prevent the queen from moving, which means that everybody gets 1 more turn before you move on to what's called structure scoring. That last spot right there is called structure scoring, and you're going to score based on what buildings you have built on your played out tiles on the board when you go to this spot, and then a new decade will start and you'll reseed the board with new buildings and new stuff in order to continue the next decade. Here you can see some of the components you're going to start Noblemen with. First, and most importantly, you have this giant player protector sheet here that tells you, one, that you are a baron. You'll note that you have this title that slips into it. It says baron. On the other side, if you're female, you can play baroness and slide it in the same way. But kind of a cool little thing that tells you your title, which has no function at the beginning, but will later in the game, serving for victory points and prestige and other things like that. In addition, on the inside of this, it tells you a lot about the game and how to play. On top of this, you're going to have several other things. You're going to start the game with a bunch of tiles. You can see different tiles here. We have fields, which will be made into farms. We have woods, which will be made into forests. We have these fountains, which will be made into gardens. And we have some meadows, which are for building structures on. Now, this leads us into the game. But first, you start with some money here, and you start with 2 special action tiles that I'll cover in a little bit. Now, on your turn, you get to do 3 things potentially. You can play exactly 1 action, you can play a scandal card, and you can trade tiles in for other tiles. So on your turn, you can take an action, and the actions are many and varied, but a lot of it's going to focus around playing tiles from behind your board out to your area that you're trying to build, and that's called expanding your estate. And you can play up to 3 tiles from behind your board out to your area, expanding your estate. So the different tiles provide different benefits. For example, playing one of these fields out is going to give you 1 money. Now you'll note that in one corner of each of these tiles there is some type of shape. In this case it's part of a square. And if you build these out properly, you can try and build that square. So I place my 3 tiles and I'm 3/4 of the way towards building a square. I would get 3 money for doing this. And if I were to finish this square on a future turn, I would get an additional 2 money for finishing this square. So the next tile I would place would actually be worth 3 money if I were to place it and finish that square. Much like that, the woods here, when you place them, are going to build a diamond in the center. So we'd place them out like this, and we'd start building that diamond. For each one of these you place out, you're going to get to draw a new tile from this bag, randomly. If you finish the one in the center, you're going to draw 2 extra tiles. The gardens here are going to build a circle in the center. You can see a big fountain in the center of that. Build gardens. And when you finish it, you'll have 1 garden, and in the center you'll finish that. You get nothing as you're building these, but when you finish it, you're going to get to take the queen from whoever has it, which is going to advance that round marker 1 space and give you a victory point. So it kind of furthers the game along and gives you some points. The meadows, which are the last ones here, give you nothing additionally when you play them, but they are going to be the only type of place you can build buildings on, which takes us to the second action, building buildings. So instead of placing something out, you could build a building. Building buildings has variable costs, and there are variable types of buildings. We have a castle here, and castles are going to allow you to, when you build them, place one of your guys out onto somebody's completed structure. So if they had completed a garden and they had a circle in the center, let's say they had all these out here and they had 1 more, you could place this on your opponent's area, and if they have the queen, they're going to have to give you the queen. Otherwise, if it happens to be a woods, a forest, they're going to have to give you 2 tiles from their supply, and if it's a farm, they're going to have to give you 2 money. So those are beneficial, and they're actually going to play another role during some other scoring parts in the game. Building a chapel is going to give you some cards to your hand, but it's also going to give you extra points later in the structure scoring if you've surrounded the castle or the palace that it's next to. So you want to get these next to castles and palaces, preferably multiple of them, in order to score extra points. Building a palace is actually going to replace a castle on your board, which is going to give you more points for it during the structure scoring and more points for any chapels that are next to it as well. But you must replace a castle on your board, and you can't build palaces next to palaces or castles next to castles, as well as chapels next to chapels. Follies, which are the last type of building you can build, are going to be straight point scorers. They're going to give you points for building them, and they have prerequisites to being built. Some of them require you to have 2 full forests, some require 2 full farms, or 2 full farms, some require 2 full gardens, and 1 requires 1 of each. And being the first person to build one of these is going to give you the most points, and each person who builds one afterwards is going to get progressively less. The third option on your turn is to bribe the royalty, which is to buy those bribe tokens. These can be turned in later during masquerades or during specific actions to get more money or to get more prestige or to do various other things in the game. So those are useful to have. You can turn them back in. You get a victory point for buying them, and they have benefits later on. The fourth action is going to be to collect taxes, and you can do this once per decade. You have a token here that looks like this where you can collect taxes. And when you play this out, you're going to get money based on how many farms you have in play. So if you have these different fields out in play, each field you have is going to give you 1 money. Each completed farm, which is 4 tiles with the square shape, is going to give you 2 extra money. And then each of your guys that you have out on somebody else's farm is going to give you 2 more money. On top of that, if you turn in those bribe tokens that I told you earlier, you'll get 1 more money for them. So you recoup some of your money you paid to buy them, and you got the victory point for buying them initially. Much like that, you can also acquire land, which is another token. You'd use this and put it outside your sheet, and you would get land. And instead of getting money for these, you're going to draw tiles, and you're going to get it based on how many forests you have in play. So 1 forest is 1, 2 forest is 2. If you have a completed full woods, each woods is going to give you 1 tile. Each forest will give you 2 extra tiles. And each of your guys that you have out on somebody else's forest is going to give you 2 more tiles, and the bribe tokens can be used for more. So you get the idea there. But you can only do this once per decade, so you can't do it many turns in a row, and you probably want to save it when you don't have something better to do. The second to last and the last action are pretty basic. You saw I talked about the donating to church. You can simply get rid of tiles you don't want on the board, up to 3 of each type per decade to get a point for each. And then your last option is leisure time, where you can simply just take a victory point by resting on your turn and doing nothing. So on your turn, you're going to do one of those actions, and then you have a chance to play scandal cards. Now, everybody's going to start the game with scandal cards, at least 1. They're going to start with 1. but you can get more, and they have various effects. So this one's going to let you play 3 more tiles on your turn. This one here will give you 4 random tiles. This one here is really only good at the end of a round when you're going to go to a masquerade. It's going to give you 3 prestige. When you start a masquerade, meaning that the round marker has moved onto the masquerade spot on the round track, you're going to first take your title that you have and return it to the supply. So you will no longer be a baroness or a baron, at least for the time being. After that, you're going to start scoring prestige for the masquerade, and you're going to get prestige for several different things. First, each garden that you've played out to your estate is going to be worth 1 point. Or each fountain, sorry. Each completed garden, which is 4 fountains in the right shape, is going to be worth 2 bonus prestige. On top of that, if you have your guy out on someone else's garden, occupying the center circle, you're going to get 2 more. Palaces that you've built will be worth even more prestige, so you'll add those in for 2 more prestige. And then you're going to get prestige for returning bribe tokens, which you may have bought earlier. You're going to get them for the card that you have right here, the blackmail card, if you return it at this point. And then you can return any other scandal cards you have face down to the bottom of the pile for 1 each. And so everybody's going to add up in turn order their amount of prestige, and they're going to advance themselves on the prestige track on that center tracker. If someone ties with you after you've already advanced, they go to the next lower spot, so no one can ever be tied. Once you finish doing this, whoever has the highest prestige is going to get the best title. So you can see there are various titles here. We have the Marquess or the Marquis on the other side, and we have the Viscountess or the Duchess. And some of these are higher than others, so you'll see this one only requires 2 prestige, whereas this one requires 10. This one requires at least 6. And they go up to 14, so you can see here the Duchess requires 14 prestige. You're going to get the highest one you qualify for. So let's say I only had 10, or I had 11. I would get the 10. In addition, that's going to give me 5 victory points, and it's going to give me 2 money. So there's a benefit to having this. The next person down would get the next one down in order. So maybe they have over 6, so they get the Earl. It's 3 points and a money. And maybe the next person doesn't have enough to get the 2. They only have 0. They're going to get stuck with a Baroness. And they go back to getting no benefit, and they'll get that title, and you'll move on with the game, going to the next round of play. When you get to the structure scoring part of the game, you're going to score all of your structures. And as I said previously, you only get points for castles and palaces if they're completely surrounded by tiles on all sides, including diagonals. Each castle that's surrounded is going to be worth 3 points, and each of the chapels that is next to it is going to give a bonus point. Each palace that's completely surrounded will be 5 points, and the chapels next to them will give you 2 bonus points. So if this was surrounded, it would be 5 plus 2 is 7 points. You get no more points for any follies you've built, and then after that the decade's going to end. You're going to reseed the center board with more buildings, and you're going to continue on with the game until the 3rd decade is gone, and then whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to be the winner. And there you have Noblemen by Tasty Minstrel Games. Now this is a game that I didn't know what to expect going into it. I didn't know anything about the game, and I got it in. And it looked really interesting to me, and it is very interesting to me. And I'm not sure I can explain exactly why, just like I'm not exactly sure that my video really got the gameplay across. And that's because this game seems really complex when you read the rules. There's a lot of different actions you can take on your turn, but when you sit down and play it, it's really not all that hard to flow through. Really, it's going to be a lot of placing tiles and trying to build structures, a little bit less donating those tiles to the church and or taking the taxation or acquiring lands actions, and very rarely are you going to skip a turn for victory points. So I mean, it's got that aspect of it sounds complex and it's not, which is something I tend to always like. If a game sounds difficult but plays very simply, it's something I'm really a fan of. In addition, it takes all of these different Euro mechanics like tile laying and structure building and kind of combines them all into one easy to play and easy to understand Euro that utilizes a lot of mechanics minimally to do a big picture type of scenario. You're building that estate, putting out tiles, putting out structures, accomplishing a lot, using a lot of mechanics, but not overwhelmed by what you're doing. Finally, I really like the timing mechanism of the queen that you have out there. If you want to advance the game, you can try and pass that queen around or get that queen around to you as much as possible to advance the round, but if you're trying to delay the game in order to catch up in points or in order to try and just get more done in a certain amount of time, you're going to want to try and avoid getting that queen, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes you get the queen even when you don't want it, because you need to build things out for For example, the masquerades, you want to have more gardens on the board, but building more gardens can potentially get you the queen, which is going to be bad for you. So all of these things combined, the complexity contrasted by the actual simplicity and the timing, which is somewhat of a new feel to the game, really add up into a package that I enjoy quite a bit. Hopefully I can get several more plays of this in, and it continues to, scratch that complex but simple itch for me. And hopefully it gets out there and gets into a lot more hands so that people can really learn to appreciate this game and what it has to offer.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.